What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Drop, brought to you by TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for another UNC basketball-related topic centered around Elliot Cadeau. And in this one, we're going to be talking about how Elliot Cadeau's presence potentially affects North Carolina's offensive approach next season. Very interesting topic, and one I'm looking forward to kind of hearing your take on in particular. So AJ, I'll go ahead and kick it to you on this one. And I know you can't, I don't know if you're going to answer this whole question in one kick to you, because I know there's a lot of different kind of elements of this, but tell me, in your opinion, at least, how, with what we know about Cadeau's game on paper, I know we've talked to David a lot. He's seen him play, would you say 9 times in the last 5 weeks or something crazy like that? So seen a lot of his game, had a lot of positive things to say about him. Obviously, we've watched a lot of film on him as well. But when you look at his game and you look at his skill set and you look at what he brings to North Carolina, do you think it maybe changes the approach Carolina takes? I have an opinion on what I think one of his skill sets in particular, maybe Carolina should start doing more next season. But go ahead and give me your take on how his presence potentially affects North Carolina's offensive approach going into next year.
Well, David and I, on the pod that we did the day he reclassified, and you and I in a couple of pods we've done since, we've talked a lot about how it affects other players and how it affects the style. But I think what's key here is the approach. Mm-hmm. The approach is the design. It's the intent on how they play. So they could morph into something every once in a while and have these attributes that if stuff breaks down, he can drive and he's got these dudes to kick out. We've talked a lot about Ryan and RJ getting open threes with the shot clock winding down, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But this is more about the intent, the approach, how they go about things offensively. Last year, it's no secret, they ran a ton of set plays and got to the point, and I had multiple players tell me, one of them told me multiple times, opponents knew what they were running. So they were able to snuff stuff out. So when opponents knew what they were running and you could play off a couple of guys and one of your 2 consistent scorers has the ball in his hands, it made Carolina pretty easy to defend. And I asked Hubert at one point during the season, gosh, it may have been late January, early February. I think it was early February. It may have been the Monday after the Duke game, after Leaky and RJ told me that, Duke knew what they were running. I asked him, I said, when do you run freelance motion? Freelance motion is what Roy ran a lot. So motion offense, it's a freelance offense with motion principles. And he called sets. He called sets more with younger teams. That's one of the things that frustrated him the first year because they didn't run what he called a few times. But it was a freelance offense with motion principles. And Hubert said, well, we run motion freelance in the open court, but we never do it after a made basket, that kind of thing. I think when you've got a group like this, and it's not just Cadeau, but RJ, when he's playing the 2, he's been a point for a couple of years. You have Ryan at the 3, who's run the point at Notre Dame. You've got Ingram at the 4, who has run the point at times, had run the point at times at Stanford. To me, when you've got guys who play with their heads up, guys who are aware, guys who anticipate well, guys who are fully connected with teammates and are comfortable passing the ball as being a big part of their game, and they can cut and they understand spacing and movement and angles and playing off one another. I just don't see how running a lot of set plays with that group makes a lot of sense. I think that this is a unit that you can trust to be smart and play a freelance with motion principles and get the most out of their skills. And their skills just aren't bouncing the ball and shooting the ball. The skills are how they view things, how they read things. So much of motion offense is reading the defense, reading the movement, and reacting accordingly. I think that they have the makeup to be a fantastic freelance motion offense. And I think that would be the best approach. Now, I don't get paid millions of dollars to be a head coach, so I don't know as much as Hubert does. But I think as we look forward and we anticipate and we say, hey, this might be the best way to do things, I don't think there's any doubt. Run some set plays, yeah. But, man, you got that kind of group out there on the floor. I say Make sure they understand the motion principles. Make sure they have a required amount of connectivity out there and chemistry, and let them go.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. No, I completely agree. And I want to, you talked about the motion offense in that respect in terms of that. I want to switch the focus real quick to transition, maybe how Carolina's approach in that respect changes, because we've talked about over the last couple of years as well. Carolina's slowly under Hubert, not really slowly, it's shifted away from a transition. It's not a team that gets out on the break, really. It's not a team that even looks to do that anymore. We talked about it ad nauseum last year, especially as the year went on, of how slow Carolina played at times, even when they had opportunities during games to push the ball on defenses and chose not to and run set plays. And we talked about how that it seemed like negatively affected the team as the year went on. And, and we all know what happened and how the season ended for Carolina. But when I look at Cadeau's game and you go watch his film for 2 minutes and I guarantee you'll see a highlight of him pushing it in transition, kicking it out to guys on the break, doing those outlet passes to maybe the 3 guard or even some bigs in certain situations. Go and looking at his AAU film. To me, when you look at Cadeau's game, it just makes too much sense. You have to push the ball a little bit more. I think that's the game he likes to play. And it's, again, AJ, it's not only him. It's also the lineup that I think Carolina will play. We did a separate daily drop. Go check it out if you haven't seen it, talking about how Carolina will potentially line up starting 5-wise next year. And we kind of consensually agreed on Elliot Cadeau, RJ Davis at the 2, Cormac Ryan at the 3, Harrison Ingram at the 4, Armando Bacot at the 5. AJ, I look at that team on paper and I say, okay, that's a team that can push the ball because you've got athletes. You got RJ Davis. You got a guy who years ago under Roy in his couple seasons there was running the break, or one season under Roy, they were running the break a lot more. RJ was a guy with his skill sets at that point guard, liked to push the ball and was pretty good at it. Now you've got him at the 2 guard. He can run the floor. Cormac Ryan can run the floor. Harrison Ingram is a 4. 6'6", he can run the floor. Obviously, he's a good enough athlete to do that. And even Armando Bacot can get up and down the floor as well. To me, when I look at that starting 5 in particular, and you got the guy like Elliot Cadeau running the show with that 5, that team is a team that is very, very well equipped, or maybe I shouldn't say team, a group in a 5 right there that is very well equipped to push the ball and get out in transition. To me, it's a no-brainer that Carolina needs to do that. Now, will they do that? If you're looking at on the last 2 years of evidence, no, they won't. They won't push the ball if we're taking the last couple years at face value. But this is a completely different team. This is a roster like we've talked about that Hubert has now built. His hands are etched all over this. It's not like he's got leftover players. It's just all, leftover Roy players. Like we've seen we've seen that tossed at Hubert as kind of a thing to save face a little bit when he has struggled. This isn't a roster he's been able to build. That excuse is no longer out of the window. And when I look at this team and I look at this group, even beyond the starting 5, I think this is a team that could excel really, really well in transition with Cadeau running the show. Do you agree with that? Do you think this is a team that should probably look to play in transition a little bit more than it has in the last couple seasons?
Absolutely. No doubt about it. If we see them get a quick strike bucket after an opponent's basket, then that's a sign of a shift in approach, because they haven't looked to do that. I mean, he called sets in the open court after misses sometimes. So, and I just think it got to a point with last year's team, and I maybe was a little too critical at times about the set play stuff with Hubert. Really, when you take a full view and look back, they kind of had to run a lot of sets to try to get looks because of the way they were defended, because of some of the limitations offensively. That won't be the case now, but I'm going to go you one step further about the starting unit. I think the second 5, they're more athletic than the first 5.
Good point, yeah.
You've got Trimble, who's incredibly athletic. You've got Wilcher, incredibly athletic. You've got Wojcik, who's far more athletic than people give him credit for. You've got Withers, who's extremely athletic at the 4, and Washington be extremely athletic at the 5. I think that when you insert guys from the bench, it shouldn't change the pace with which they play. In fact, it could pick up at times. So I think that pushing the ball, looking to get easy baskets is absolutely something they need to do. They had some very efficient offensive games last year, and you look up and they got 78 points. Because they're not getting easy baskets. They're not getting baskets in transition. The same team under Roy Williams in 2019, albeit that was a better team, obviously, but still, if they have the same kind of efficiency in the half court, in a given game, you look up and they got 92 points because they're getting those easy baskets. So I think that is something that must happen moving forward, whether it's Hubert Davis or anybody else. They got to look to run more often. They got to look to steal easy baskets more often because, again, every time you score, it puts a mental weight on the opponent, which is why when people get all hung up about, well, they don't shoot enough threes, don't hit enough threes. If you're scoring and scoring and scoring, there's a mental wear down effect there. Roy's teams did it for years. Now, this isn't going to be a prototypical Roy team because you're not going to have a bunch of big guys. And although Roy did, as I sidebar for a moment, 5 of his last 9 teams, he had a stretch 4. So just to put that out there for the people who refuse to accept history as it was, but still Roy's preferred approach was to run a lot of that double 2 guys on the block stuff. He even did it when he had a stretch 4. So I think that's the way that they need to play. I have a feeling that they're probably going to play that way. I think the indication that we've seen from Hubert through what he's done in the portal is that he learned a lot. Remember the 6 and 7 football season? You and I did so many pods. We talk about, this year is a year where Mac Brown learns the most. And he's going to make some changes according to how this year went because he's recognized some things. I believe that Hubert, especially late in the year, and maybe with a conversation or two after the season, has learned a lot because he's not – when he brought in Pete Nance, it was almost like he was trying to plug in the Brady Manick hole. It didn't work because there's only one Brady Manick. Now, he's not trying to plug in holes of what departed. He's doing something different. He brought in different body types, different skill levels, different skill types, different approaches, guys who play the game a little bit differently, a lot more ball handlers, guys who, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, guys who can play a motion offense and play fast because they see things well. When you have guys on the court that anticipate well and see, well, you're going to play faster because they're going to recognize stuff as it's happening instead of after it happens. We did a pod about how Armando will benefit from having Elliot Cadeau because when Armando seals a guy on the block, Elliot's going to see it quicker and get the ball to him quicker. So you're playing quicker just because of recognition and execution. So instead of taking that shot, if Armando ends up getting the ball with 16 seconds on the shot clock and tries to make his move, now he gets it with 19 seconds on the shot clock or 18 seconds. Everything's going to be a little bit quicker. I think skip passes, I think swinging the ball on the perimeter, all those kinds of things are going to occur. It's not just running fast break. It's not just trying to kick it in transition after an opponent's made basket. It's quicker half-court stuff because of their spacing, because of their recognition, because you're going to have 4 guys on the floor that are fully capable of completing all kinds of passes that lead to shot opportunities. They're going to play faster for all those reasons, not just fast break stuff. And I think that will be part of their approach. It's going to be to pick it up, or as the great Emeril Lagasse used to say, they're going to kick it up a notch and go bam more often this year. How about that one?
Yeah, that's a great one. I haven't heard you took me down memory lane a little bit because I feel like Emeril Lagasse maybe when I was growing up was a little bit, but I feel like I haven't heard that name in 10 years, AJ. But as soon as
I think he's just like selling pots and pans on TV.
Yeah, man, no, but he was big when I haven't heard that bam that sound effect in a long time. But you hit the nail on the head with that, man. That's exactly kind of what you would expect Carolina, their approach to change this year in that respect. And for me, AJ, as someone who covers the team, and I probably think you'll agree with this too. I think one of the most fascinating things about going into next season is, okay, what has changed? Because we're talking about maybe right now what should change, what makes sense, but what actually from Hubert, what actually did he learn from last year? And with this new roster that he's built, what does actually change when it comes to in-game stuff? Because again, I think I even look at last year's team, AJ, we talked about it. I thought last year's team was a team that would have been really good in transition. When you look at Caleb Love and RJ, particularly at those 2 guard spots, those are guys who like to get out and play and get to the basket and play in space like that.
They should have been better. They should have been better.
And it wasn't not only they should have been better. They didn't do it really. It's not like they even at times didn't really attempt to do it. Yeah,
that's exactly. That's why the word approach is the key word here. Approach is intent. Approach is part of design.
Yeah.
So if the approach is to do this, then they'll be a lot faster. Of course, if the approach isn't to do that, then they won't be significantly. They might be quicker in their recognition in the half court and everything, but they're not going to fly up and down the court more. No. So it's all about the approach.
Okay.
I think the approach will be different. And I think that the evidence that gives me the belief that that will happen is how Hubert has built this roster.
Yeah.
He's built this roster to do that, to be a team that can handle that more. And especially when you add Elliot Cadeau, I think that's sort of the cherry on top. There's no doubt about it.
Agreed. It's not rocket science. When you talked about it, this roster has been built in on paper fits a certain type of playing style, and you should adhere to that playing style. The key of any coach's job is to get the best out of his players. And if a different maybe approach and a different system better fits this roster that Hubert has built, then the approach from last year has to change going into next year. And you would expect it to, especially when you, like I've said earlier, when you consider Hubert's fingerprints are all over this roster. This is his roster. This is his team. This is the team that he's built. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think they're built more to handle lots of different approaches.
Agreed.
And that's why I emphasize, and we're going to do a pod probably in reserves, maybe. We do lots of these drops, so we may do one at some point, maybe sooner rather than later. But I think that's why when we identify, hey, this is starting five probably in the podcast, I very quickly also identified what they get from the next five, because they can actually put a 1 through 5 on the floor and be very competitive with that group. So, and there's some different players. Yeah, they're going to be coming off the bench. If our projected starting lineup is accurate, and we're not forgetting Zayden High here, it's just that we think Zayden's a little bit of a project, and he may get a little bit of time behind Armando. We'll have to wait and see. But as it stands right now, they have 11 on scholarship. I think 6 through 10 are guys that will get in games early, and they could play a 1 through 5 there. They can bring 2 6'9" guys off the bench.
It's not bad, is it?
Pretty good. I mean, for a team that people are concerned about its length and everything, I think that's not bad. No. So they could do a lot of things. But absolutely, the approach, I think we'll see a shift in that, and they'll be a more entertaining team to watch, maybe a little bit less head-scratching, because they were head-scratching at times, actually often last year. So that I hope it's like that, because I want to see a lot of different things, which will give us so much to talk about and so much to write about. And journalistically speaking, I want to see all kinds of variations, because that will make it far more interesting to cover and more fun to cover. Because the variety, one of the things I love about covering football is there's 22 starters. So there's a lot of variety. There's 22 stories right there. So basketball, they don't have the same number of people involved. So they do a lot of different things. It adds to the variety. It'll make it more interesting. I would think for fans and certainly for us.
Yeah, no doubt. I just think this is a lot more balanced of a roster all the way around. And I think it's a roster and a unit in terms of the personnel that's been brought in that makes a lot of sense, especially when you look at that starting five. And going to be, like you said, AJ, it's going to be fascinating just to see how this team lines up next year, how they play, how the philosophy's changed, and potentially how good they can be. Because I think on paper, this team has the potential to be a really, really good unit. So we'll see what happens, guys. We want to hear from you. Like with all these daily drops, we want to hear your guys' opinions on what we're talking about. So get involved. All the links are below. Head on over to our website. We'll post this on the premium message boards. Get involved in that thread. If you're not signed up, you can do so for just $8.33 a month. Head on over to Twitter at Hill Illustrated and Facebook at Tar Heel Illustrated. Get involved. We want to hear from you guys. And again, you can even reach out to me directly at Twitter at Jacob Turner, THI. We want to hear your guys' opinions on this specific topic. AJ, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the Daily Drop. We appreciate you guys watching. As always, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and AJ, I got to tell the people, hit the notification bell, right? We're uploading pretty much every day during the week with these, hence the word daily drop. Pretty much 5 days a week, we're rolling these out, even doing more with some UNC basketball shows, UNC football shows, and other THI podcasts that we're putting out as well. We're putting a lot of content out on the YouTube channel during this off season. And again, if you want to see and be notified every single time we upload, you got to smash that notification bell. And so you'll stay up to date on that. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.